going to be Kaue Fernandes versus Marc Diakiese. This is going to be a very, very interesting fight because we basically have Kaue Fernandes. I mean, he's a unknown kind of fighter, right? If you go to like sometimes we don't even have his date of birth, official kind of date of birth. I mean, on UFC.com or UFC stats, they say that he's born March 17th, 1995, but that's the only thing that I saw. I don't really see any other date of birth. So this guy's a total kind of mystery man, if you will, for the general public. Um, he is 8-1, 4-1 in his last five. His last loss was to another kind of undefeated fighter, if you will. He's obviously from Brazil, fighting against Marc Diakiese, a UFC veteran, 16-7. He is 2-3 in his last five, coming off of that kind of submission with a loss against Joel Alvarez there, Darce choke. He's 30 years old, 5'10". As far as the reach and the height, I think these guys are probably going to be pretty similar. Again, we don't have a kind of reach on Kaue yet because he needs to kind of officially measure out. But I think these guys are going to be probably pretty similar as far as their measurables. Just going into this fight and breaking down the tape for Kaue is really interesting because he doesn't really have too much tape. A lot of the things that I found out about him are, kind of word of mouth and kind of just doing research. He does fight out of this camp called Nova Yanao, really famous camp that has been a long-term partner in feeding legitimate talent to the UFC. The fighters from this camp include Jose Aldo, Renan Barão, Leonardo Santos, Mateus Nicolau. Those guys are all kind of legit. Cowie's actually been training with Jose Aldo in his younger days, or something that I also found out as well. There's like some pictures or videos of him doing that. So interesting kind of training that he's had throughout his whole career. He made his pro debut in 2013 and has a great 8-1 record, although that does mean that he's averaging less than one fight a year, right? That's not the most active fighter that we have here. I think that when I do see the tape of him, especially his last two fights, I mean, he's been KOing people early in the round one with some devastating, dangerous kicks. I mean, the last fight that he had, I believe it was a head kick KO within like early in round one. The second to last was a kick to the body. So this guy has devastating kicks, and it ended with the kicks. He fights pretty free and loose on the toes. He can also get flashy, dance outside the pocket. I also think that he has good speed and power to attack and get inside the pocket pretty quick. A Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, pretty well-rounded fighter with solid takedown defense. Not the best, but it is solid. I think that he might have a potential gas cardio issue, especially this being a UFC debut, right? We haven't really seen this guy in the UFC cage against a UFC caliber kind of opponent like Marc Diakiese. Marc obviously is a powerful kickboxer, turned into a wrestler, grappler later on in his career, especially his last few fights. I feel like he's been pretty timid later on in his career, doesn't really want to entertain those slugfests anymore. For me, that makes him really into a bad optics kind of fighter, right? He relies on the takedowns, control time to pull out the win on the judge's scorecard, doesn't really dominate in this realm even unless it's a zero like a Slava Claus who he beat or Demir Hazovic who he beat as well. I mean, those guys are basically on the ground at least. I think they're kind of cans, if you will. Really, ever since he lost to Rafael Fiziev, which was fight of the night, it was a great fight. I feel like he's lost the swag that he had on the feet. I mean, he even lost a decision to Michael Johnson, right? That's not really a good look. I mean, Michael Johnson's good, but way past his prime. I mean, that's not a good look to lose a decision to him. He got submitted by Rafael Alves, who's I don't even think that guy's in the UFC anymore, right? I'm pretty sure they cut him for losing a lot. So it's just not really that impressive of a resume so far in his last five fights. I personally think that the UFC is done with Mark. and his boring kind of style where he just tries to grapple people to death, and they want to push Kaue and Sao Paulo. The only concern I have is Kaue, although I think he's a good underdog play, I'm concerned that he might be like first round or bust, or like, second round or bust or something like that, just because he does have some cardio gas tank issues. However, I feel like he's going to be dangerous enough to finish a guy like Marc Diakiese. I mean, Mark was just finished his last fight against Joel Alvarez, right? Even though that one came under kind of some fluky, kind of way, but still he got finished pretty early. So the play here for me and the pick is Cowie. I think it's a good underdog play. I would just go with his money line, or if I am too concerned about his gas tank, maybe just something like a round one, or like an inside the distance decision, no action. That's something that is also in play. And just to let you know about the odds for this fight, I mean, it's getting closer and closer by the day. Mark Diakiese opened up at a minus 175, and he's now a minus 123. It's almost a pick 'em now. So a lot of dog odds for this fight, for Cowie at least, has been bet down. And, he's getting closer to a pick 'em. That's why I think that the value might not be there anymore, to be honest. Um, the props really haven't released yet. The only prop that we have is an over 2.5, which is at one minus 165 right now. So people do think that this fight's going to go to decision. Um, yeah, I think Cowie is a good money line play, and I'll look for the props when they release. However, people do think this is going to decision. So if it does go decision, yeah, I mean, Mark Diakiese could win that. So I think inside the distance decision, no action could be good too, because I don't think Mark's going to finish Cowie, from what I see. So the pick here is Cowie. Gerard, what are your thoughts on this first fight that we have to kick off the card here?
So Cowie, he doesn't have. I wasn't able to find too much tape on him, but from what I've heard and what I was able to see, he does have, I guess, some dynamic strikes in terms of those kicks. And yeah, like you said, yeah, he might have a gas tank issue, which doesn't bode well against Marc Diakiese, who I think might be able to uh, overpower him and use his strength against him. I just don't know if Fernandez is able to find a finish here, because I do think Diakiese is actually pretty durable, and he's pretty experienced as well. And on a debut fight for Fernandez, he's going up against a experienced fighter who was pretty well rounded. I would say, who started off as a striker, and he can mix it up. And yeah, I think Diakiese might be able to just, if he takes him down, he can hold him there for quite a bit, I think. And if it gets past round one, that's even worse for Fernandez. So I'm probably gonna pass on this just because I'm just not sure of what's gonna happen here. And I'm leaning Mark Diakiese just on experience and durability and being able to have more ways to do things. But Fernandez is probably more the more dangerous fighter. But if it gets past round one, then it could be bad for Fernandez. So yeah, I'm leaning Diakiese here, but I'm probably gonna pass.
Makes sense. And another thing that I just thought about, by the way, is this is similar to when Fernando Padilla fought Julian Erosa, right? Fernando Padilla was this guy that the UFC kind of kept under wraps. I mean, there's not really that much tape of Fernando, not too much tape that I saw. And Fernando, the difference between this fight and that fight, obviously, was Fernando was like a plus 200 dog. And I remember that because I got him in that dog action. So that's why I remember that. But the difference here is that, I mean, this is a pick 'em, right? So the value is kind of gone at this point. That's why I don't know if there's too much value left as far as putting Cowie as like a near pick'em. Plus 200, I'll be all over that all the time. But the reason why Fernando and Cowie are kind of similar is just because Kaue just has no kind of limited tape as well, right? People really don't know about this guy. His date of birth isn't really even available outside, so I feel like I don't know. And Marc Diakiese is a kind of a well-known name within the kind of non-casual MMA scene, right? Everybody kind of knows him. He's fought in a lot of fights in the UFC. So I don't know. Maybe they might be feeding this guy so he can kind of build off the hype and name, just like Padilla did, and maybe they sell him for the next time when he faces a guy like a Kyle Nelson or something like that. So who knows? We'll see what happens though.